Fourth meeting of the Budget Review Subcommittee on Economic Development, Tourism, Public Protection, and Energy. And at this time, I'd like to ask the Madam Secretary to call the roll, please.
Representative All, Representative Bray, Representative Gentry, here. Representative Hart,
Here.
Representative Lockett, Representative Petrie, Representative Reed,
Here.
Representative Weber, and Chairman Fugit.
Here. Thank you, Madam Secretary. And today's presentation, we have representatives from the Economic Development Cabinet as well as the Tourism Cabinet. They'll be presenting about projects in rural Kentucky. And I'm excited about hearing about this. So I'd like to have Economic Development come up here at this time, come to the table. Jeff Knoll and Katie Smith and whoever else may be with you. Come to the table. I'm glad to see y'all. And if you would, introduce yourself.
Yes, sir. My name is Jeff Knoll, and I'm the Secretary for the Cabinet for Economic Development, a role that I assumed sometime in June of this past year.
Hello, I'm Katie Smith, and I'm the Deputy Secretary at the Cabinet for Economic Development.
All right, raise your right hand to be sworn. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the whole truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, sir.
All right, you may proceed.
Excellent. What we'd like to do today is just go through some of the things that we're doing around rural economic development, but also define some of the things that we're seeing in what we mean by rural. So we've tried to put together what we would call the definition of rural communities, and basically it's any community that's not in the top 10 populace from an urban setting perspective, but we also want to focus our discussions on how we see Western Kentucky, Eastern Kentucky, and we've added another dimension in here, and that's also the distressed communities within major urban areas relative to the kind of programs and things we're trying to do, especially to achieve our mission. And if we go to the next slide, our job is to really be a great collaborator, and we're trying to build opportunity for all residents in Kentucky and not just a few, which is one of the reasons why I think today's topic is so important. And so what you have before you is what we call within the cabinet internally is our one-pager that tries to lay our vision, our mission, both our strategic imperatives, but also not only the operational priorities, but what are the goals that we're trying to achieve.
I didn't do anything.
Hold on one second. If you would hold your presentation just for a second.
Happy to do so.
Because we've needed a quorum to do some things that we need to do the last 3 weeks.
Yes, sir.
So I would entertain a motion for the minutes for the meetings on February the 8th, February the 15th, February the 22nd, while we have a quorum. Do I have a motion? Representative Reed, Representative Lockett. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Any opposed? Nope. All right. Thank you, Representative. And you may proceed, and I apologize for that.
No apologies needed, and we appreciate doing what we need to do, and as well as adjusting to technical difficulties.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, to summarize this one page, I think it's just real important that everybody realize we need to have a guiding principles. We need to know what it is that we're doing at the cabinet, and we also need to have the outcome measurements and the performance indicators of how well we are doing. So for 2023, our goal is to announce 12,000 new jobs from companies locating or expanding. We've got a real target of achieving $27 per hour in wages before benefits, but with that comes judgment. We believe there are certain communities, certain kinds of jobs, and certain areas in which these jobs are partaking, if you will, that it's important to get them in our state. And it's also important to help people get access to jobs at all levels, and I call those pathway jobs. But our still overall goal is $27 an hour before benefits. We also really want to see a lot more media impressions about the progress that's happening in Kentucky. We want to identify the rewards of the investments that the legislature made, and we thank them for that in the Product Development Initiative so that we can talk about the sites that we have in our state, but also talk about, in many ways, the things people don't know. the kinds of companies that are locating in rural areas, such as down in Graves County, the kinds of high-tech businesses that are starting, such as in Bell County this year, but also the partnerships that we have in developing those jobs. So we're going to focus more on getting media impressions. And another very tactical measurement is we will close 575 transactions that require written agreements. And I think it's important to understand that level of activity for an organization of our size, because any kind of a transaction would be one, and that would include the loan documentation and disbursement of the loan that was made on behalf of Ford and SK on the Blue Oval project. That's just one. We will do that 574 more times in the upcoming year, and we will always do this following the behaviors as well as the values that we've established within our cabinet, and I just call out attention to one. I think it's time that we articulate the good things happening in Kentucky, and I would say it's time for us to expect that winning is part of our culture and that a spirit of winning with integrity is how we go about doing all of our business. And we enter into any situation on a company looking to expand or locate here, we've got to have that attitude that we can win, and we have nothing to apologize for as a state, and they're going to be lucky to be able to expand or locate in our state going forward. But that also means making sure that we cover the entire state, and that's why I reference helping all Kentuckians and not just a few. So some of our strategic enablers for the upcoming year is just that. I think we need a very specific roadmap for economic development done by and for economic developers to really have a very succinct set of guidelines and a succinct set of targeted industries that we need to partake in and help to move the state forward. It needs to be a strategic architecture that's very crystal clear, and it includes making sure that we adjust our strategies and perhaps in some cases adjust our tools to not only make them so they fit everywhere in the state, but adjust them so they are very focused on, if you will, the rural parts of our state, eastern, western Kentucky, as well as those distressed urban neighborhoods. And we think that that strategy is the timing is right, and I'll talk about that in just a second. These are the values that we expect of our team, and I only show them because whether you're an individual people leader or an individual contributor, those values guide what we do every day. And I come back to them because that's actually how we measure our team, and I'm very proud of the way our team has embraced these values going forward. At the end of the day, we can talk about jobs, we can talk about the outcomes, but we have a purpose, and that purpose at the Cabinet for Economic Development is really to recognize that a stable job is what's the difference for someone in terms of having a house, which is shelter, versus having a home in which they've got an ability to dream and to raise their children for a brighter, better future. That's our purpose and what we do at the Cabinet. I talked about our strategic plan and what we need to do on a process going forward, and if we'll go to the next slide. The time's right. We've had great successes, but in answer to some of your specific questions that you asked in terms of inviting us here today, I think we need a better strategy in terms of really recognizing how the world has changed, but also what's uniquely different about our rural communities, what's uniquely different in eastern Kentucky versus western Kentucky, and make sure that we're going after specific companies that are a better fit in those areas, but also tailoring those tools so that they're flexible to be really impactful and effective in those particular areas. And so I've added the areas of why we're doing this spirit of winning, but also why it's now the right time to go out and put together this blueprint. We're already going out to identify consultants. We've identified the funding internally, and we have a structure that I'll talk about in a minute, how we propose to do it. But to answer the question, I think we need flexible tools and better strategies to meet the needs of all rural communities in our eastern Kentucky areas as well as those distressed neighborhoods. The world's changed. The addition of some major companies in our state has also brought about change, but now we need to adjust to those changes and build off that platform of success to have that roadmap going forward. That structure is an important one because we want to roll out a strategy where we get the voices of all of the partners, and I call it this way. We're going to assign and ask individuals of our key process partners to be on point to work with us on that strategy, to then bring that to the legislature. We want organizational support, but we want individual leadership so that we don't cumber this process down and trying to create everything for everybody. We want a very concise document that helps us move forward. And here's an example of that structure. If this document comes in 2 words more than 75 pages, or better yet, 50 pages, the consultant may be marched down Main Street, tarred and feathered, and moved on without being paid because we don't need that kind of a document. We want a very concise, specific set of actions that we know what we need to go against and where we need to deploy those resources to make a difference, especially in all parts of our state, and that includes, again, rural, eastern, western, and distressed neighborhoods. I think it's important to also see how we're thinking at the Cabinet. Now, this is a very busy slide, but we're trying to articulate what's happening in eastern Kentucky, what's happening in western Kentucky, and we've identified a map that shows all the wonderful road improvements and investments that the legislature has provided, as well as the investments being made in technical training institutions, workforce training areas, to also then show the investments that are being made and how that's going to change the complexity, if you will, or the accessibility, if you will, to all parts of Kentucky and in between, and having a visual way of interpreting that and showing all the investments that the legislature has approved is an important way for us to work with community leaders as well as companies to realize every community brings something unique and special for their consideration, and we're investing in making it easier to accessibility into those communities, but also doing business in those communities so that we can touch all 120 counties in the state. Here's just the same slide, but focusing in on the western Kentucky elements of both people and physical infrastructure we think is how you have to go about selling the state. I think also it's important to understand that speed to market is you got to have buildings and you got to have products. And so we appreciate not only the support of the pilot projects that were done for the PDI program, but for the funding of $100 million in this effort. And we've just concluded our first round. We've notified communities that are moving forward into the due diligence phase. But I think more importantly, we're already out there talking to communities and talking to them about how do we get more applications in round two that'll be coming forth in June of this year. The good news is we do have a current good state of sites. The challenge is not all of those sites fit the criteria that companies are looking for. And more importantly, we've gone from having to have sites that says, here's the dirt, to where now you've got to have all the information relative to that site, and you've got to be able to present the big picture of what it's going to be like to locate on that site for companies to make a decision, and you've got to remove all uncertainties associated both with that site and what it's like to do business in those communities in order for those communities to be considered, which was a major element of how we put forth the funding opportunities for communities. Just don't bring dirt. Let's bring the full picture of what it's like and what are the benefits of doing business in your respective area. These are all the build-ready sites that we have, I think, currently in the state of Kentucky because it was part of a build-ready program, a nice, diverse mix across the state. That doesn't mean that we don't show other sites and all the other sites that may not fit that defined criteria under the Build Ready program. That's why we have 375 in our database, and I can assure you every time we have a company that sends us criteria, we try to fit every county in the state into the mix to be eligible for that consideration. We use that database regularly, routinely, and exhaustively. The PDI program is also a partnership, and I want to emphasize this. The Kentucky Association of Economic Developers is a professional trade association for economic developers. They're the perfect partner. And having a third party come in and do the analysis of those sites is critically important. So we've used, I think, the best because this is a company that works with companies in terms of choosing sites. And they have a great process in which it's the totality of what the community needs to be able to present that we use them to do the scoring in terms of those applications under the PDI program. And we use them to help work with us as a cabinet and also with the Kentucky Association of Economic Developers to, in effect, work side by side with every community to get their applications either ready or, in some cases, resubmit their applications to make them stronger for round two. Pilot program. I'm not going to go through this. I wanted to give it, though, to you for information. Pilot programs have already paid dividends. Just in western Kentucky, we've had some $10 billion worth of project investments. You see where these are located. All that came because of your support for the pilot programs under the PDI initiative that's now led to the $100 million. These are successes that are in the rearview mirror before we even start deploying that $100 million. Here's some programs in eastern Kentucky. Good projects. Let me just take a step back. We need more applicants. We even need more applicants than what we had in round one. And I was in Prestonsburg, Paintsville, and several other communities yesterday, meeting with the ad district, meeting with local economic developers to encourage them to apply. And what I found was there's going to be multiple more applications in round two They just weren't ready yet in round one, but we're going to continue to have our road show. We're going to continue to work with the Kentucky Socioeconomic Developers. We're going to continue to have websites to get and to encourage more communities to participate in the PDI program. In terms of the new and expanding, and if we take the definitions I mentioned earlier, you see the investments in 2021 as well as in 2022 based on that definition of rural versus urban. Now, is our definition correct? It may or may not be, Mr. Chairman. We definitely want to hear from all members of this body and if we need to adjust or change. But we felt like if we really kind of took those top 10 urban centers and then every other community was a part of that, we thought we had done a nice job of delineating between urban versus rural, and then we also articulate east versus west, and we're adding another component, which is the neighborhoods and urban distressed areas. This will give you an example of some of the projects that have been announced in new and expanding areas, both, well, technically across the state. And do we have enough dots and enough projects in each of all 120 counties? The answer is no, and we need to expand upon that, which is why we go back to that strategy. But also let me take a step back. Most of these projects that I'm familiar with, well, I'll say all of them, they didn't locate in a community with county boundaries. They located in an area that they had what they needed, and that included multiple surrounding counties relative to the access to the workforce, the supply base. Many of the projects that are here are actually going to increase their use of suppliers that are located in surrounding communities all across and including all across the state. That's how we're trying to lift up, but it gives you a visual understanding of the projects that we've announced across the state. We've had some successes that I think are worth noting. I mentioned the project down in Graves County, which is not only locating in a rural area, but they're also ag-related, agriculturally related. It's a company that makes disc blades for the ag industry and construction industry, and they're moving a major operation into Graves County. We also have a project in Salyersville and McGOFFIN County that has come about here recently, but we need to do more, and that's why I go back to the flexible tools we need to have. And in addition, we need to start understanding the kinds of companies that are out there and the companies that are changing, and how do we make them be a better fit across all of the 120 counties in Kentucky. The small business tax credit, which I'm proud to say that this year Clay, HART, and LARUE counties have participated. But this is an area that's near and dear to my heart, having once been in the real estate business and knowing what it's like to have your own payroll and also in the tobacco warehousing business. I like to see this credit program used to help small businesses get additional tools to strengthen, employ people, and more importantly, potentially grow into major employers across our state. This gives you a sense of some of the area development districts for which we have been participating. And as we're on the topic of area development districts, I made a pledge that I would first go visit every area development district meetings on their site before I started meeting with individual communities. I've done that. I've been to every one of them. And I got to tell you, they are major, major partners that we need relative to our work and successful work going forward. Kentucky Innovation Hubs. When I was in this job a long, long time ago, the Kentucky Science and Technology Council was actually a part of our cabinet. I made the decision that we needed to move that out, and we need to start to decentralize the efforts around innovation and entrepreneurialism, because you need a decentralized set of tools to do that. And now these are all the programs that cover the state that are part of our cabinet, but they receive funding, they receive technical support, but they are boots on the ground in the communities working with high-tech startups, small businesses, and working with universities and community colleges to help grow these businesses. And this gives you a sense of the dispersion of these organizations and where they represent across the state. We have a lot going on with SOAR, clearly in eastern Kentucky, but they do an outstanding job and they have capacity to address and deal with these that territory. The tax incentive programs that you provide to us, there are several. And you can see in dark blue, these are ones that meet the enhanced communities definitions. These are all programs that work, but I would like to analyze them all, do a great job of understanding where the world is heading, and make sure that these tools are fitting the real needs of the future, especially for rural Kentucky, especially for pockets of eastern and western Kentucky, and especially for neighborhoods in some of those urban distressed neighborhoods. We might need to tweak, fine-tune some of these tools to be more impactful and effective in terms of attracting, growing, and developing jobs. And by definition, you can see the enhanced incentive communities that get better benefits to encourage companies to locate in those enhanced communities based upon several sets of criteria. And you can also see the ones that were decertified this past year and ones that were decertified in 2021 and 2020. I think that's a goal, is to help communities fall out of that category when the timing is right. So this is a list then of all of those communities for your information. As you know, all of our programs are performance-based, and all of the tools that we have are really tied to either the tax income liability of the individual employee, the corporate tax liability of the company, or some sort of refundable tax credit that might be defined like under the entertainment district program that I think is important for the state. But these are the tools, and again, we're not taking away money from the General Assembly per se, or should I say the budget. Rather, these are tools that apply to the incremental benefits that these companies are going to create in generating revenues into the budget. So we think these are good programs. We think they're excellent in terms of what we do. But I'd be remiss if I were to say I think we still need to be smarter about it, which is why we're going to be doing the strategic planning work between now and the end of the year. And I just want to amplify that. I've said in every community speech I've given that every community needs to lean in to who they are. And every community's got something uniquely different, whether it's access to natural resources for ecotourism, whether it's a very strong agricultural base, which for people like me, I get goosebumps in my arms when I go to visit. It's just what I love to see. Or the areas that have certain kinds of industries located there. The more a county or city or township embraces who they are and articulates the vision for where they want to go, the better chance we have for existing companies to grow and companies to locate there in terms of generating new employment. And that's one of the reasons tourism, and I'm not just teeing up who's following us, even though I'll defer all of your questions to the tourism cabinet. I do think it's important to understand there's an interdependencies. All of our 120 counties are interdependent, but yet each one of them has something uniquely special. And it's something uniquely special that if you have an ecotourism, or you've got a place to go canoeing, or you've got a great place to even go to a restaurant, you name it, people from outside the state want to visit those areas. When people visit those areas, they become the best advocates and the best proponents of what Kentucky has to offer. And in my 28 years in Michigan, I gave out so many recommendations about where to go on the Bourbon Trail, where to go in to go fishing, because I would meet people and they'd say, "You're from Kentucky." And I'd say, "Well, how did you guess?" But nonetheless, they said, "We can tell." And I would give them that information, and I was always meeting some people who said, "That is the most fantastic state. We vacation there every year. We go fishing there every year." And they were the ones that I would then pull into, and I will now. Help recommend why you should move there. Recommend why you should move your business there. There is a great correlation between how we are perceived as a great tourism state and how we are perceived as a great place to live. And if we are perceived as a great place to live, we're going to be perceived as a great place to invest in businesses. And I can assure you that the more tourism grows, the more the quality of life deliverables, restaurants, all the other things that go along with it, they strengthen as well. So that's why we believe very strongly it's a great partnership, and we respect the heck out of what the Tourism Cabinet does. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I've spoken longer than I know I should, but questions and answers, and I gave you at a very high level what's going on within our cabinet.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Secretary Noel. I've got a couple questions, actually a few questions.
Yes, sir.
What's the biggest obstacle to getting jobs or economic development into the rural parts of Kentucky? When I say rural, East Kentucky, far west Kentucky, what's the biggest obstacle?
Yeah, first of all, it's one of the reasons I want to do this strategy so that we have data to answer your question. I've got some data and some understanding, and one is, I'm not sure I'm going to say the biggest obstacle. I think the greatest challenge, though, is we need to understand what each community brings and what they're perfectly ripe for, and then make sure we're trying to attract, recruit, and bring those kind of companies in that fit the right profile of what our communities have to offer as a step one. Because step two is when you get announcements of those kinds of jobs, you can move into maybe bigger projects. Sometimes I feel like, and I'm guilty of it as well, some 500 or 600 employee plant's going to solve all the issues in any area across our state, in any community across the country. That's not quite always true. I'd almost rather have a company that's going to employ 50 or 100 and become really involved in the community that helps us then attract someone else. But some of the challenges in Eastern Kentucky tend to be lack of concentration of other manufacturers, supply chain, some of the logistical issues, and we're solving and dealing with that, I think, with a lot of the road improvements that are being made. I think another is leaning back into who you are as a community and being proud of it, and then working together to say, and this is the kind of company that we want in the area. I think another goes back to perception about workforce. I believe very strongly that Eastern Kentucky especially has a much bigger and better workforce than perhaps the perceptions may be. I mean, when I meet folks that drive 2 hours because they love their community, but they're willing to drive 2 hours to go to work at one of the companies maybe in central Kentucky, and I know their talent base, then we need to make sure they are better articulating that for companies. So workforce is an issue that we definitely need to work on, and because companies are changing so rapidly, we need to adjust our strategy for the kinds of companies and what drives them to make those decisions, to have both our presentation and tools and targeted list of companies defined against that outcome of rural Kentucky, East Kentucky, West Kentucky.
Right. I've got a neighbor that travels 2 hours one way to Toyota every day from Hazard. And, he loves the mountains. And one thing you said that will lead me into my next question is we need to lean into who we are.
Yes, sir.
So are you familiar with Hatfield-McCoy Trail System?
Yes, sir, I am.
In West Virginia, they're recognized as economic development rather than tourism because last year they had 96,000 riders that came into eight counties in West Virginia, southern part of West. Do you have any idea what the economic impact of that was?
I can only assume it's huge.
$38 million.
I'm sure.
So leaning into who we are in the mountains, obviously we were the coal industry, and in my county alone, I think we lost about 1,400 coal jobs in Perry County. Prior to representing Breathitt and Owsley, I had Harlan, and they had about the same number of coal jobs. So 3,000, 3,500 jobs in the coal industry. That's just coal, not counting mom and pop stores, garages, tire shops, and all that. So since then, how do we go from coal to nothing? That's what we went from coal to nothing. So I really would like for the Economic Development Cabinet to look at and help me look into the trail system as not just we're going to go down and ride a bunch of four-wheelers, but we're going to use it as economic development. I know one particular place in West Virginia that laid off coal miners, said I'm tired of getting laid off, and he started a campground basically. Mm-hmm. Built 11 cabins. He rents side by sides. Got a little dairy bar on top of the mountain. Has 25 RV hookups. Now has 16 employees that work for him full time. That's in West Virginia. But we may not ever land a 250 or 300 job factory. But if we can get a lot of 10 to 20 employer places across the whole 18 counties, so across all of East Kentucky, that would make a big difference for us. And so I'd like to have some private meetings later on, maybe during the summer, just to discuss how do we go from coal to, let's bring, 96,000 riders, and 85% of those riders were from outside of the state of West Virginia. So that's outside money coming in.
Yes, sir.
And that's what we've got to do in East Kentucky. And we got to bring in outside people to there. Again, if we look at it just as tourism, that's fine too, because I'm for that, because there's no place, in my opinion, that is as pretty as the mountains of East Kentucky.
I agree with you, Mr. Chairman.
And so we can do tourism, but I think if economic development looks at some things, that would bring help into the rural parts of East Kentucky. As I look at the job announcements, I'm happy for every part of Kentucky that gets jobs. I'm happy for that. but most of East Kentucky, there's been no real big job announcements in many years. There's been a few, and we're blessed in the mountains, and so I'm not griping. I'm just saying. I think if we look at what we've got, if we lean into who we are, we're mountains that's full of trails already there, that allows for our communities to grow and people there that could build different things. That would be a big help to us.
Mr. Chairman, first of all, we need more Air Cupboards, who, as you know, has put together his small business to help do the kind of motor vehicle activities across eastern Kentucky, and I agree 100%. That's why I made the reference to we need this strategy, and I'm going to commit to you the following. In fact, I'll send it to you. Our letter that's about to go out asking for consultants to tell us what they can do to help us. We have in there a very specific point that says there will be a group that will specifically target our rural areas, but especially eastern Kentucky, to develop the strategies, develop the kind of activities, including tourism, so that we can make that a part of our economic development effort. Now, we never want to encroach upon the tourism cabinet's activities, but I think there are a lot of things that can be done, because where I was in Michigan, which was not the same, but it was an area in which had lost all of its manufacturing, 55% above, below poverty lived there. It took me a while, but I had to realize I need to build a tourism strategy that leads then into job creation strategy that then leads into attraction. And we built a lot of physical development undertakings to really grow and build tourism, and I believe that with everything I've got, that's how you start to get people want to live in those areas, is based on that tourism and quality of life. That's why they will then want to kind of invest in that area, and that's what I meant by leaning in. So, Mr. Chairman, I'm 100% aligned with you.
I took that as